Welcome back to the studio. Today we're going to pick up where we left last time with our Hummingbird Garden block of the month. If you remember, we did all the cutting for the background of the block of the month, and I chose a soft butter yellow solid fabric, and this was the first block that we did last month. Beautiful hibiscus on there, and what we'll imagine are also ginger. So I have my box that I'm organizing all my pieces in. I've taken out the block that we pre-cut for block number 2, and I have my pressing cloth, so I can go ahead and put my box aside. And if you'll remember, I took the cover photo off of the block of the month packet when I got it, and I'm using this as my identifier to help keep myself organized. It's a pretty chilly day here. Even though it's in the afternoon, it hasn't really seemed to warm up very much. What I'm going to do is take my block number 2 and take the components out. Oh wait, this is block number 1. I was going to say that felt pretty empty. I can switch these two out. I'm doing all my props, my prop handling. Okay, this feels better. Got some actual pieces in there. I have my Teflon pressing sheet out, and I'm going to carefully take out my packet, all of the applique pieces, and there are some small ones on here, so you really want to watch and make sure you don't get them off on the floor. I have done that, and when they're right sides up, they're kind of easy to find, but when you drop them on the floor and your floor is kind of white and gray, that backing paper looks very similar to the floor, so it takes a little bit of effort to find those. Okay, I forgot to get my iron out, so I went ahead and did that. I pulled my pattern out, and you can see it's very crinkly and dimensional. And the first thing I always like to do when I'm doing one of these is to go ahead and iron my pattern, because I don't want any of these big folds to be holding up the fabric in a way that it would distort where the pattern piece goes. So I just quickly iron this from the front and the back just to get it flat. And then I can go ahead and set my pattern piece, my background piece, on top of it and get a pretty good idea that I have the right fabric for the block of the month, for this month. Now at this point I'm going to bring you in closer, because you don't need to watch me, you just want to see the pattern, and then we can get moving on putting these pieces in place. So I'll go ahead and move the camera in. You can see by the outline on the pattern that I do have my right background piece. So for the moment I'm just going to go ahead and set this aside, and then I'm going to go about the business of laying out these pieces on the pattern where they're supposed to go. I do this just to double check that I have everything in order, and it's almost like a little puzzle. This is something that you could also have your kids or grandkids help with. As long as they're not too rough with the pieces, you should be fine. But they could just pretend it's a puzzle. I also have some pieces up here that I'm going to lay out, but then I'm going to put them back in the bag, because these are the pieces for where the blocks will be joined together and overlap, and I'm not going to need those until we get further in the completion of the quilt. So once I get these laid out, I can go ahead and put them aside. And I've saved my little plastic bag. I had it here just a second ago. I've saved the little plastic bag just to put them back into. So now that I have all of the parts for the dragonfly, I can go ahead and find out where I stowed my plastic bag and tuck all those back inside. Apparently I tucked it on the floor. And I can put these back in my storage bin and know that I have all the pieces. You could also label this bag, but I think I'll remember. That will save on some of the confusion. Okay, so now we can get to laying out these pieces a little bit quicker. Once I do these very specific shapes, it's a little bit easier then to come in with some of these feathers that are, you know, quite a few of them are very similar. Green. I'll almost be doing this twice because we'll be doing it again when we get the fabric in place. Quite a few of these are very similar in shape and size, so you want to be careful, make sure that you get them in the correct place. And look at this little white eye. That's for the bird. So I'll keep that in order. So now that I know I've got all of my pieces, I can go ahead and lay my background onto the pattern. And I'm going to look through the camera real quick and see if that is visible enough, or if I want to use the light box today. I've had some people say that they could see better without the light box, and some people say they need the light box. Okay, we're going to go ahead without the light box today, and we're going to do this in real time, so you'll see just how long it takes for me to peel these paper off. All of the components of this are batik fabric. They've all been laser cut, so they have a very crisp edge, and they're pre-fused with Steam-A-Seam 2, and you can see it has the paper backing, and also it has a sticky coating on it. And that sticky coating allows us to position and then reposition if we need to. So you can see that that is stuck on there, but if I need to or I wanted to, I could go ahead and peel it right back up. It's repositionable until we hit it with the iron. And because it is Steam-A-Seam 2, it does require a steam component. I'm going to pull that out just a little bit more. As I said earlier, it's a little bit chilly here today. And I don't mind the cold at all, but I do wish we had snow to go with it. I love the snow. If I could afford it, I would live somewhere where they had even more snow. Mountains of snow. Used to be you had to worry about all kinds of things like getting out and but nowadays you could have almost anything delivered. All I do when I'm peeling these papers is slightly bend the edge of the fabric, and that peels right off. If you ever have a problem with a piece that isn't peeling right, you can take any kind of pen or seam ripper and score the back of the paper and then bend it over, and it gives you a place to peel from. So it makes it very, very easy to do. Depending on the age of your family members, you could have younger adults or teenagers or maybe even very dexterous smaller children help with the placement of these pieces. The nice thing is you could let them help you and get a feeling of accomplishment, but if you had a piece that wasn't quite where you wanted it, you could always reposition it before you hit it with the iron. Now, ironing is not something I would let the younger ones do. But this is a nice project that different age and skill levels could participate in. It's certainly much, much faster than traditional applique. And it's nice to have these really super crisp edges that are created when the pieces are laser cut. If I ever get caught up with one of the colors, I always just refer back to my color page, which has all of the pieces already on there, so you could get a really good idea of exactly where something goes. And if these are a tiny bit off, I'm not going to get too caught up in that, because once the pattern is gone, no one's ever going to know. This is one of the few things that I don't actually have a sample of in the studio. So it's going to be nice to have this finished and have something else that I could change out when I'm moving my quilts around in here. As we're going here in real time, you can see that we're just probably 3/4 of the way finished in placing these items. It may take you a little bit longer because I am really familiar with these shapes, having seen them. And I have sort of a memory of what they would be used for. what do I have? 4 pieces left. So that is it. We have all of the pieces in place. At this point, I always like to get rid of these little pieces of paper, but if you had kids, this is something that maybe they could craft with in some way. Use them to trace around or anything to keep them occupied for a little while. But what I will do next is remove the pattern from the bottom, and we can get to activating the adhesive on the back and making this permanent. So I'm going to get that set up. I've got my station cleaned again, and we'll get this finished. At this point, you can see all of the pieces are stuck to the background fabric, but they are not permanently attached. Steam 2 requires both steam and heat to adhere that adhesive, bond it from the top piece to the bottom piece. So what I like to do is just give a misting to the fabric, to my fabric pieces, and then I'm going to go ahead and lay the pressing sheet on top, and I'm going to go ahead and put my iron on there. And misting the fabric and then putting the Teflon pressing sheet on it traps that moisture in, and the heat of the iron creates steam, which will help activate the adhesive for this process. Now I always have to remember to go really slow here because it takes longer for the heat to get through the Teflon pressing sheet, and I really want to make sure that it's bonded properly at this stage. It's almost impossible to over-activate that adhesive. You're not going to melt it away. I like to use the Teflon pressing sheet also because sometimes I forget to pick up the iron and I push it sideways. And the edge of the iron will catch the edge of one of the applique components and scrunch it up. But then it's underneath the iron as it's down, and I can't tell that it's scrunched up, so I'm permanently bonding a scrunched up piece in place, which I don't like. So the Teflon pressing sheet helps protect the edges of my applique. It helps protect my iron to make sure that I don't get any glue from the Steam 2 onto the sole plate. It protects my background fabric so that I don't transfer any kind of smudge from the iron to the fabric. And it prevents me from scorching the fabric as well. So it has a lot of uses, this little pressing sheet. And although I can't see, it's not completely see-through, I can see through it enough to tell where the edges of my applique are. It's also one of those items which are basically a one-time purchase. So once you have it forever, unless you cut it for some reason or... But you can see here I'm already getting antsy. I want to keep moving around. So I'm going to take my time and let this iron out. And once I'm finished ironing this from the top side, I'm going to flip the block over, mist it again from the back, and re-iron it again from the back side, because I really want to ensure that this is properly fused from the start. If this is properly fused, it would not gum up your needle as you were stitching. Now, some people like to top stitch the edge. That's not something that we do. We quilt our pieces, but if this is fused properly, it doesn't require any top stitching. And it can go through the washer, and we've done aprons with no stitching on it. We've washed them over a dozen times and put them in the dryer, and the piece stays permanently attached. So I'm going to carry on with my ironing and iron it from the back. And you know what I did? I lost my little white eye for the bird. Now I have to look through the trash. I just realized. Why did I do it? So I'm going to look through the trash and continue ironing, and I'll see you in a second. So we finished the block for the second block. This one included the hummingbird, and you can see I even have my bird's eye view there. I ironed it completely from the top, and then I flipped it over to the back, and I did a re-spritzing with the water, and I re-ironed the whole thing, and now I know that it's completely fused in place and it's finished. Just a point of reference, I don't keep water in my iron because I'm always hearing how irons start leaking at some point. If you never put water in the iron's never going to leak. We all inevitably will bump or hit or drop the iron at some point, and it breaks the seal inside the water tank, and then it starts to leak, or the gasket gets old and dry from heating and cooling, and it cracks and starts to leak. So I just keep a little spritz bottle, pure water, and I don't put water in my iron. That way it doesn't leak. So we are done with block number 2, the hummingbird. The next block I'm excited to do because that is the tall birdhouse. I'm excited to do that one, and I look forward to seeing you join me back for that. Until then, I'll see you here in the studio.